Hello, and welcome to The Truth Will Not Be Silenced, the show that allows Black people to be seen, to be heard, and to be human. I'm your host, Melissa Woodfork-White. In today's episode, we will talk about racial justice with Rosalyn Overstreet Gonzalez, Esquire. We'll discuss the controversial topic of racial justice and the systematic fair treatment of Black people that need to be shared, that allows us to be seen, to be heard, and to be human. As a Black professional woman with over 28 years in the workforce, I have personally experienced systematic racism in the workplace because of the color of my skin. Sharing our stories allows us to be seen, to be heard, and to be human. There will be a surprise at the end of the show. Be sure to listen all the way through for the details. Our guest today is the esteemed Rosalyn Overstreet Gonzalez, Esquire. She is a native of Southern California who graduated from the prestigious Howard University in Washington, D.C. in 1986 with a Bachelor of Arts degree in Spanish linguistics and secondary education. She graduated from the District of Columbia School of Law in 1993 with her Juris Doctorate. She is a career public defender and staff attorney with the Parole Division of the Public Defender Service for the District of Columbia with bar membership in the District of Columbia, Pennsylvania, and the United States Supreme Court. Rosalyn is in her second term as the chair of the DC State Athletic Commission, having been appointed by Mayor Muriel Bowser in 2017. She is also a member of the board of directors for multiple nonprofit organizations in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area and a community activist. She has been married to her husband, Pablo, for 32 years and is the mother of 2 adult sons. Rosalyn is going to share with us her work as a community activist and the importance of racial justice. Hi, Rosalyn, and welcome to our show. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Melissa, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Awesome, awesome. So we're just going to jump right into our questions for today's show.
Okay.
What is racial justice and why the need?
Racial justice, in theory, is a state of being where everyone is treated the same, because not based on their race, not based on their color, their sexuality, but that's not what we're experiencing in the United States. So racial justice should look like an opportunity to be heard, to be seen, to be human for every single person on the planet, but it's not. That's why I do what I do. I have mainly represent Black and brown people, mainly men in the Washington, D.C. area. And it's my vision, it's my calling, it's my personal journey to help bring that about for persons who have been skipped over.
Awesome. Can you share us a little bit about the kind of people that you represent and then the people that you're going against in court? Just some examples, some of those experiences.
Certainly. And the kind of people that I represent are the kind of people that are our fathers, our mothers, our sisters, and our brothers, individuals who are Black and brown like us, who just want an opportunity to have a good life. I can honestly say that behind each one of my clients, there was something lacking, whether it was lacking food, food insecurity is a big thing, lacking parental guidance, lacking someone to be a cheerleader to say, you can do this. So people are left like a rudderless ship to chart their own course. And oftentimes, I would say 90% of those persons are not able to master that without a community that cares and that is very supportive. So my clients are majority men, forgive me, majority men who want to do the best they can, just do not have the opportunity because of the way you started out this program. They're not seen, they're not heard, and they're not respected as humans, given the dignity that they need. And it only gets worse the more contacts that you have with the criminal justice system. So as much as you want to do better, if you don't have the resources, you're not believed and you're not given the support that you need in order to do better. Because when you know better, you can do better, but you have to know better. So for 28 years, I have been representing juveniles, adults, and now my clients are persons who have been incarcerated, have been released, who are now on parole, and again, trying to navigate coming back into the free world without the resources that they need. So go ahead.
I'm so glad that you have shared that with us because it makes me think about representation. And so are Black people being fairly represented in these cases, in these courtrooms, these prosecutors, the judges? Are we seeing people that look like us to know that we have a fair shake? Or is it?
Well, when you say look like us, there are plenty of Black judges in DC in the trial court level, in the Court of Appeals, but they don't often share the same experiences that our clients have. So you can look like me on the outside, but have no clue what my life looks like. In the District of Columbia, judges are required to be District of Columbia residents, but most of the time they don't come from the neighborhoods, from the areas where our clients come from. So they really don't have the understanding of what it's like to be my client. I practice in the parole division, and so we are governed by the United States Federal Parole Commission. The parole commissioners don't have the same responsibility or requirement to live in the District of Columbia. They are, the commissioners themselves are presidential appointees. There are folks from Kentucky. There are folks from California. There are folks who have absolutely zero ties to Washington, D.C., no knowledge of what it's like to be Black, and in my opinion, unable to fairly dispense compassionate justice and relief for clients who are starting over, who have earned the right to start over, not be judged, be given the support that they need so that they can have better lives.
And you know what? I can relate to what you're saying because I've heard that. Just being out of touch, not being able to relate, being from different background, different demographics. But I am going to get a little bit controversial. And so even though we do have judges and prosecutors that look like us, the system in place was not created by us or for us. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. I would definitely agree with that. At this time in Washington, D.C., many of the defense bar is pushing to abolish the United States Parole Commission. We don't have time to go into the history of how we got here, but we used to have a D.C. parole board that ended. And so for the last 22 years, parolees in D.C. have been, their cases have been adjudicated by the United States Parole Commission. So there's a push now to sunset them and have DC reclaim authority and dominion over the parole system. And the fight now is, should it be the judges who sentenced our clients to begin with, or should it be an independent parole agency that is made up of people from DC, but also formerly incarcerated persons who can share their perspective of what the needs are, of how a person is treated and what needs to happen for he or she to be successful. So we can talk about how great, Judge so-and-so is, how efficient our courtrooms are, but until we look at the actual humanity and people one by one as individuals and create circumstances for them to be successful, and success is a moving target, but we can never stop. We must always, always, always try to help someone be their best self.
Now, what I've heard you say, it sounds wonderful, the work, the pushing forward, the transforming, the reconstructing, it all sounds great. But when you talk about Washington, D.C., how does that compare to the rest of the United States? Because like you shared with us, the demographics of Washington, D.C. is predominantly Black people, people of color. But when you talk about the United States as a whole, what does racial justice look like then?
Well, I have to say that Washington, D.C., the demographics have changed tremendously from the time I first landed in Washington, D.C. You probably know it used to be called Chocolate City.
Yes.
I recently saw a statistic that said that D.C. is 45.5% Black now.
Really?
That is correct. Black people are no longer the majority, but they are the majority of criminal defendants. So I'm sure that compares to any other area, Louisiana, for instance, places in Georgia, places in Florida, where Black people live in communities of color that are poor, that do not have the resources that they need, and they wind up just being subjected to situations that cause them to be, linked to the criminal justice system. That is why, and thank God, there are people who leave the Washington, D.C. area and they go back to where they came from, whether it was Georgia or Florida, wherever, and they're starting their own grassroots organizations to help shine some light into the darkness of, the criminal justice system in those places. We have a long way to go, a long way to go.
Yes, we do. I am in totally agreement with you. And what you have shared with us leads into the next question about what racial justice looks like as a community activist. You shared some examples of what the parole board, you've shared how people from DC are moving back to their hometowns, starting grassroots organization. What else as a community activist can you share with that you've done and what you're doing in addition to the parole board is huge, but what are some of the smaller victories?
Well, when you think of the word justice, you automatically think it has to do with the legal system because we're seeking justice. Mm-hmm. But justice to me is more than just how you're treated as a defendant or a person who's involved in a legal matter. Is your neighborhood safe? Are there grocery stores that have food that is other than fast food? Do you have to choose to go miles away from your home to go to a school that has offerings that you are interested in, that will get you to college, that will provide you with the teachers and the support that you need? As a community activist, I have aligned myself with a number of what would be considered Title I schools in Washington, D.C. to do that very thing, to empower students and make them, one of the things somebody told me a long time ago when I was in law school, which may not always work for young people, but to question authority. And by saying that, I mean, question, why am I being treated this way? And to call people out on the carpet and to get involved in the success of yourself, and it necessarily, creates success in your community. At one point in our area in Ward 1, there were no grocery stores, or there was one or two. But when Ward 1 became this hipster place that people wanted to come to, now we have every grocery store, every little, shishi poo poo store and yoga shop and all of those things. Yes.
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation.
Yes.
Gentrification.
Yes. But the other parts of town, which are referred to, which I find offensive, east of the river, barely have public transportation in the form of the metro that will link them to the services, to the joys of living in their own neighborhood. They shouldn't have to come across town to have their needs met. And until that happens, that is an injustice. It remains an injustice.
And
you went to Howard. You
yes.
you live in the neighborhood.
Yes, I remember. That's why I was shocked when you shared with me the current demographics, because it was Chocolate City when I attended Howard, graduated from Howard, came back for homecomings. It was still Chocolate City.
It is no more.
Almost 25 years later, to hear how drastically the demographics have changed it just blows my mind. But in blowing my mind, what you have shared about racial justice, it's not just legal.
No,
it's a way of life. It's a part, it's a facet. It's where you live. It's where you go to school. It's where you work. It's not just on that grand scale.
No,
it's on that local scale. And I am in totally agreement with you, because coming as a 15-year veteran educator, that's one of the things that I teach my students, is how to advocate for themselves and to make their voices heard. And one of the things that I have come up against with, racial injustice in the educational system, and especially based on my own experience, is the fact that administrators that are non-Black don't want to hear from students that are Black and brown. I had one administrator, and it's not just one, but this one specifically comes to mind because you come from that educational background, and you're also on the front lines as a community activist in that arena too, working with Title I schools. For me, when I was told by a non-Black administrator, I'm just going to say it was a white administrator, who told me that kids need to be told what to do. And the kids in which those white administrators were referring to were predominantly Black and brown students. And so when you have me, someone who looks like them, say, no, their voices matter, their voices need to be heard, then I've just placed the target on my back. And so it should not be that way. No. My voice should be like everybody else's voice. Every Black and brown student's voice should be like anybody else's voice. But for some reason, we're having to deal with these over 400 years that has been instilled in the United States of America, even across the world with the transatlantic slave trade. And it's still happening. And then you have white people that are quick to say, once again, not naming any names or anything, that are quick to say, well, I'm not racist. I have Black this, I have Black that, I hire Black this, I hire Black that. The mere fact that they even make cases like that is evidence that they're racist. Because for me, in my personal opinion, people that are non-Black, that are not racist, they don't have to try to give you a resume of Blackness.
Correct.
And
Absolutely
so
correct.
Leading into our next question, man, you have given us some gems here today and a lot to think about. And I personally am appreciative of you for taking the time out to be on my show.
And I'm honored to be here. So thank you.
Thank you. So the next question, how has racial justice personally affected you? You shared with us, and even when I introduced you, you are the mom of 2 young Black men. And so I want our viewers to hear from you, how that affects you.
I could tell stories and stories and stories, but personally, and it's one of those things where until you actually walk in those shoes, you can believe that's not really hot. I know it's fire, but it's not really hot. But as soon as you touch it yourself, you'll learn that it's hot. My oldest son received, it's been a few years, but he was down in rural Virginia near Blacksburg and got a speeding ticket. And the police officer was a white police officer, and took the time to ask him, why are you speeding? What's in the car? Are you running drugs? And he was on his way to Virginia Tech because he was a student. And then he threatened him and told him, I should take you into jail right now because, you could have killed yourself and killed somebody. Long story short, we go to court a few months later. And in Virginia, you don't have the option of not showing up. You have to show up. You can't just send your attorney, and you can't just pay a fine. And so I was baffled by going with him to his court appearance and watching the white defendants speeds reduced to 20 miles an hour lower than what he was driving, and given a ticket and told not to do it again. When my son faced this judge, and this child had just graduated from military school, had never done anything to be involved with the criminal justice system at all. The judge not only found him guilty, but gave him a 30-day suspended sentence, put him on probation for a year, and gave him a $1,500 fine. And so I was a witness right there to the disparities in how Black and brown people were treated. So needless to say, we came back to Washington. all that, the probation, everything, it all ended successfully. But just to be a Black man that now has a misdemeanor conviction for a speeding ticket is reprehensible. It does not have to be that way. So personally, that is a huge issue, a huge problem for me, the way that justice is dispensed. And that's why I think I fight so hard. It used to be when I first started my career that all the Black men that I, was representing, they were my uncles because they were all older than me. And now I've been there so long, I'm their auntie, I'm their mother. In some cases, I'm their grandmother. So I used my platform as a counselor. Like, I really believe counseling is part of my job, to my clients. And I also am an advocate for them at the same time. So I always get them to, let's make a plan, because I don't expect the landscape of this country to change anytime soon, sadly, but I can help my clients change how they navigate through the system. So I spend a lot of time doing that.
Well, I just want to say, when you told me that your son had got stopped, my heart stopped. I mean, my heart stops for every Black person
Mother
that gets stopped
yes
by the police, and especially moms.
Yes.
Because when you said that, I was like, I had no idea what you were going to
where we're going.
Exactly, because my heart just stopped.
And
it just goes back to what you had said in the beginning of our conversation about this has been going on for years. It has just become public light with modern technology. And so now it's really out there.
Yes.
And so I don't know if you saw my facial expression.
I did.
You had shared when you had shared that you had sat in that courtroom and you watched how everything was dispensed for white people. And then when it got to your son, and these are my words, the book was thrown at him as a first-time offender, and it was to crush and ruin him from becoming anything of substance in the future, because that right there is always going to be on his record. I'm sorry, but that makes me angry.
I share that anger like you wouldn't believe. And it really didn't stop there, because it was a two appearance proceeding. We wound up hiring a lawyer there, because I'm not licensed in Virginia, and getting the phone number, calling. She wouldn't answer. And that we had to drive 3 hours from Washington, D.C. So I said, you know what? What's the address? I drove her over to her office, and she was there, just not answering our phone call. And then, so I was able to get into the office, because of course this was all pre-COVID. And she commenced to ask me questions about other clients that she had from Washington, because they were Black, and she had no clue how to present them to a judge and humanize them as they should be humanized and get the best possible outcome. And so it's different everywhere you go, but it's bad. I'm just going to jump out there and say it's bad everywhere for Black people, everywhere.
I'm in agreement with you, because coming out to the Phoenix area, because we live in Phoenix, moving from Atlanta, Georgia, metropolitan, we lived in Atlanta, and coming out here and having to deal with what we face. You've touched on every aspect of something that I've dealt with here. And it's just like, it's a constant reminder that nothing has changed, and that we are still fighting the same fight. We are still fighting the same fight to be seen, to be heard, and to be human in every area, every faucet, political, economical,
and in particular medical, as we navigate our way through COVID, and how devastated Black communities have been. Black communities will continue to be for the foreseeable future, because there's less of a desire to help Black people create environments that are sustainable, that are healthy, and that will change the trajectory of our lives.
And you know what? I'm in agreement with you, Roz, because of the simple fact that It's too many people that don't look like us, that know that it's wrong, but because they're comfortable with where they are and that they have all of this set up for their families, which we're trying to get set up for our own families, and they don't want to jeopardize that, so they stay quiet. It's just like being in agreement with all that is wrong that is going on.
You're complicit if you're not part of.
There you go.
That's
the word I was looking for.
Tear down this system. You're complicit.
I've had people that don't look like me to tell me that I saw what they did to you. I know that that's wrong, but I can't
jeopardize.
I can't, it's like, and it's like, wow, then how are we going to change it? Because Black people have been fighting this fight for centuries. How are we going to change it unless everybody that don't look like us start to step up to the plate? And then we're going to continue to fight until we do get that change. I'm a firm believer, Roz, that and this is where my faith comes in. We got to pray until change comes. So we got to continue to work until change comes. And it seems what's going against it, they think that we'll eventually give up. Why would we give up when we're not having the same equal rights, when we're not being equally, fairly treated? I mean, it was in your face, Roz. The judge was just saying in your face. Yeah, this is white privilege. This is what being white is all about. And then as soon as your son get up, just threw the book at him.
Absolutely.
And I'm just like, every time we have to work twice as hard as anybody else. And then when we do, we still get diminished for it. And then we get treated as in, who do we think we are? Why do we have to be a who do we think we are, Roz? Why can't we just be human?
Why can't we just, why can't we just be, I am who I am?
Yes. Yes. And so, not going to get us off track, but because of your extensive and rich background, I do want to hear, how has the recent events of racial justice changed how you interact with non-Black people? And we touched on it a little bit when we talked about Ahmaud Arbery, Eric Gardner, and just to throw out some more names, because I'm going to keep saying their names until justice rolls over. Sandra Bland, Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice. How has the recent events of racial injustice changed how you interact with non-Black people?
Well, we all have choices about who we're going to have in our life. And, coming from Southern California to Washington, D.C., it was a true culture shock. But it was probably the best thing that happened to me, because it allowed me to see that there was a difference, or that there is a difference in experience, and likewise how people treat you. I am a member of, my agency. After George Floyd passed, we did a little housekeeping ourselves to find out that while we say we're, in lockstep with one another in representing our clients, we're multiracial and multi-background, and we have our own baggage and bias against each other as well as against our clients. So I joined the Interracial Justice Committee. And so we have been meeting bi-monthly, and we worked as a group to set up group norms to include, there is no hierarchy here, and, everyone is equal, and et cetera, et cetera. And we're made up of Black, white, Asian, Middle Eastern. I'm the dinosaur. I'm the oldest one there, but there's also young attorneys of color, not of color, investigators, administrators, because you know how it is in an office. Sometimes the administrative folks are treated the worst, like they value less because of the title that they have. That for me has never been an issue. I am friendly with the janitor and I'm friends with the director, and everybody's going to get the same treatment from me as long as I get the same treatment from them. So I think I've worked a little harder to try to be, to give examples, to to my friends and to my neighbors of what racial bias looks like and how it can be overcome, and how you didn't think that what you said about, collard greens and chicken, thought it was just a joke. It's really not a joke. It's perpetuating a stereotype that really you guys applied to us. We didn't start that. And so we refuse to own it, and we are going to demand that you stop, saying that and equating that. Because believe it or not, what happens in the United States is seen around the world.
Yes.
And that's why the world believes it's okay to treat Black people the way they do, because they see what happens here. I spent some time abroad studying. I was treated very, very well in Europe, and in South America, Central America, because there's a healthy love for our own selves, but there's a love for people around you. And that's not to say that it's perfect, but the United States has set the example of how to treat us, and that's why it happens. So I hope to continue to, work in creating and promoting equality, creating racial justice, calling it out, not trying to embarrass anyone or diminish anyone, but to educate, because, knowledge is power. And when you know better, you do better.
Man, you touched on a lot. When you talked about those stereotypes, oh my goodness. One of the ones that I've had to combat is and you're familiar with this, angry Black woman.
Yes.
I refuse to submit. You're trying to tell me that I can't be confident. You're trying to tell me that I can't be knowledgeable in what it is that I do. You're trying to tell me that I can't stand up for what it is that I'm experienced in doing and leading.
And I can call out what I see that should not be.
Yes. And you also touched on how we're treated in other places, because I too have overseas background. I've been over to the Middle East, I've been across Europe and so forth. And they do, in some of those countries, they do treat us better than we get treated here in America. Yes. I can say from my own personal experience in education, when I taught in England, they just flat out told me, we want everything that you know. We want to know how you're doing, because I'm American and we do things different from how the British people do things differently. And so they just told me to my face, we want everything that you have.
Yep.
And I gave it to them because they were transparent. They acknowledged in my expertise and my background, and then they were transparent as what they wanted from me. There were like no covers, no blinders, no backsiding. Whereas in the United States, they don't say that stuff to your face.
No, it's very covert.
And it's not transparent.
No.
And that's another thing, Roz. I'm tired of people throwing that word around. Can I be transparent? Well, I'm just going to be transparent. You're not being transparent. Right. You're just not being transparent.
That should be how you carry yourself. You shouldn't have to ask if you can be, because you should be.
And so in me sharing my professional experience with teaching over in England, I didn't take offense. They told me exactly what it was that they wanted from me. And they said that everything that you know, how you do things, we want to know. We want you to show us. And then I said to them, well, how you all do things, I want to know too.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. So that's being transparent.
Yes.
They acknowledged in my experience, my education, my credentials, everything, and said, we want all of that. And then on top of that, I reciprocated, I want all of what you have.
What you have.
Okay. And so I learned some different things of how I've been taught as a teacher that has improved what I do, which makes me more than a highly effective teacher in the classroom because I have that overseas experience.
Yes.
And so that's why I'm like, you can't put a price to that, Roz. What I bring to the classroom is like what nobody else brings to the classroom, because I come from a small percentage that have never probably taught outside the state in which they work in.
Yes.
And so with that being said, this leads me to my final question. How does sharing your story, and you already did touch on this, but I just want you to just, hit it home for us.
How
does sharing your story today help others?
Yeah. I mean, we'll think back to our history and our grandparents telling your parents how they overcame, and then your parents building on that legacy and pouring into you so that you too could achieve, what it is that you wanted to do. And I'm sure you're doing the same with your family. So sharing of information is really crucial. I am a firm believer in mentoring. And mentoring doesn't mean I'm going to pick up my mentee and we're going to go get Cokes and burgers. No, it is letting them know about your life. It is supporting them and cheerleading them and helping them help their entire family if they need to. That's the only way, we can get better as people. Our young people who are in schools and universities right now need internships, need opportunities, and we have to open those doors, because I'm not sure who coined the phrase, but, each one, reach one or teach one. It's real.
Yeah.
It is real. At Howard, I was the manager for the women's basketball team, and Coach Sonia Tyler, single mom, taking the girls, the women's team to the championship. But that woman means so much to me. She never sat me down and said, here, do this, and this. No, she led by example. So we have got to continue to, when we do stuff in public, make sure we're doing it right, because somebody is always watching. Make sure you're standing up for yourself so kids see how to do it. When they say, charity starts at home, so much of that starts at home. And we do have to be charitable. We have to give back. It's money that moves the economy and the economy of individual families. So to he who much is given, much is expected. And I believe that, so many times I've thought, I've got to get away from this job. I could be making double the salary that I'm making. And like you talked about your spirituality, God has let me go on interviews, let me have a second interview, and then in the end said, no, you're good right there. And so I've accepted it. I believe that I'm walking in my calling, and it's really, really important that we help others see their callings, embrace it, make changes, fight, win, love, cry. It's life. So we've just got to be a good example of good stewards of our communities, of our families, and of our world.
And thank you so very much. I am in total agreement. For my listeners, I know you guys hear me say that a lot, because I am. I mean, having the conversation, sharing the information, mentoring, leading by example, those are all things that we all should be doing to better the situation, to better the course, to change the course of action. And that's the reason why I do what I do too, Rosalyn, because it has to be said, it has to be seen, it has to be heard until that change comes. And we're going to have to continue to work until that change comes.
And so people should support, the Melissas of the world. Be a guest on your podcast. When Black business, we have to support Black business. We have to let our leaders know we're there, that when they say let's march, you're like, let me zip up my boots and let's go. We've got to be unified in order to do it.
Yes.
So I thank you for this conversation, because it is rich.
You're about to make me turn.
It's okay. We should cry, and that's another thing. We've got to let the world and ourselves know that it's okay to be emotional. That's part of life.
Yeah.
We're leading, and you're leading by example. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And once again, we enjoyed having you on our show. You have so much knowledge and so many gems. You dropped them all. Well, not all of them. You just dropped a portion of it today on the show. And we would love to have you come back.
But I'm grateful. I'm very grateful. And I would be more than happy to come back.
Well, thank you so very much. Next week, we'll continue to discuss controversial topics about race and have conversations about personal and professional experiences with racism, love, loss, employment, and education. Stories that need to be shared, seen, and heard that makes us human. The truth will not be silenced. To be seen, to be heard, to be human.
The surprise. Following the link in the show notes lets Buzzsprout know we sent you and help support our show. Buzzsprout is the best way to launch a professional podcast. Want to ask a question, be a guest, or subscribe to this podcast, The Truth Will Not Be Silenced? Click on the show link. Thank you for joining us.